Well, Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights and Labor, Michael Posner, is joining us now from Chicago to talk about this relationship. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Now, when we talk about what's been going on between China and Google, tell us what role you think that the government, the U.S. government that is, should have to play here.
Well, first of all, the U.S., this is a matter between a private company and a government, Google and China. The U.S. government doesn't have and hasn't had a formal relationship. What we do have is a broader interest in Internet freedom, and the Secretary of State and the President have articulated a number of times our interest in having a universal, a global Internet that's free and allows people to seek and impart and disseminate information. We have a broader policy interest in making that happen.
Now, and as you said, Secretary Clinton has spoken about that, but have you heard from Google? Have you gotten any pressure from Google that the company is disappointed that the U.S. hasn't, as you say, formalized perhaps a relationship or formalized support of the company in this matter?
No, there are, obviously there's discussions with Google and other companies, but we've been pretty clear and will be clear that we're not going to intervene on behalf of any one company and any government. Our role is a broader role. It's to deal with the broader policy issue. And this isn't just about China. It's about a global desire and a global policy aimed at promoting Internet freedom and freedom of expression. This is really a human rights discussion about free expression, freedom of assembly, using these new communications technologies.
But as you mentioned that, I'm struck by the fact that we're also talking about some countries, maybe some regimes that do not share America's sense of freedom of the press and the freedoms that we have here, but which other societies are still longing for. How do you make that connection when you're up against a society that just doesn't believe the same things that we do?
Well, this is what I do every day for a living. We have many countries in the world that have a very different view of human rights than we do in this country, especially on issues of free speech, freedom of the press. We, last month, produced a human rights report that looked at 194 countries. If you look at a lot of those chapters, there are restrictions on a free press, there are restrictions on free speech. We call it as we see it. We raise these issues diplomatically. We try to make sure that that we lead by example, and we also try to help those in societies that are trying to promote free expression and freedom of the press within their own countries.
Now, as someone who used to be with an NGO, Human Rights First, do you now feel that you're in a government role that sometimes the U.S., for political reasons, maybe doesn't speak out as forcefully on some of these matters as it should?
Well, obviously, a non-governmental human rights organization has a different role to play, but I'm really quite encouraged by the extent to which the President and Secretary of State have staked out the importance of these Internet freedom issues. The Secretary delivered a very forceful speech at the museum in January in Washington. The President has spoken out about this repeatedly.
Right.
I think the U.S. government is foursquare behind the notion of maintaining and expanding Internet freedom as a global policy, and we're carrying that out in different ways, but there really is a government-wide commitment to do that.
Well, even though, as you say, there have been several speeches made, talk to us about some examples of that commitment in terms of action.
Sure. Well, really, there's sort of three aspects of what we're trying to do. One is at a programmatic level. Congress has appropriated millions of dollars, $30 million to date, to allow us both to support new technologies that circumvent the restrictions on the Internet, but just as importantly, to work with groups to educate, to train groups on how to use these new technologies. We're training foreign service officers, we're training diplomats on how to deal with these issues in different countries. We're also doing reporting. There's increased reporting through the human rights reports on restrictions on Internet freedom, which we covered quite extensively this year. And we also are responding when there are challenges, there are attacks on bloggers, journalists, others who are using the internet, we're very much involved on a day-to-day basis in trying to be sure that diplomatically we're responding to those threats.
Michael, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for your time. Michael Posner is Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor.